Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. The headlines. Senate begins final push on voting rights bills with eye to filibuster reform. And you go, need the voting rights stuff done. Need that done immediately. If Democrats are going to be competitive in the next election, because as we speak, Republicans are not shy about the fact that they are going to rig the next election. They are doing everything in their power to ensure that the game is already over before it even begins. And I look to Tennessee. Tennessee doing what I'm not going to just say Republicans, what people in power do. You know, that old saying, absolute power corrupts absolutely. This is that. The story being reported today is that the Republicans in Tennessee are looking at Nashville, which is a Democratic stronghold, and looking at how they're going to carve that up in such a way that they're going to basically dilute the Democrats' stronghold of Nashville. And they'll put a little bit over in this district, a little bit over in this district, a little bit over there, a little bit here, a little spice of it over there, basically watering it down to where you get no Democrats. And this is how they've played the game and won as many seats as they've have. Because understand, their policies are not popular. They don't have a policy agenda that the American people want other than hate and division. And this is not new. This is not new. In fact, I had someone remind me the other day that, Reagan era forward, it's been really all about destroying government. And the people that they've put into these positions of power have all been about restraining the power of we the people, of silencing us. Because if you want to destroy government, if you want to shrink government to the size that you can drag it in the bathroom and drown it in the bathtub, what you're really saying is, I'm fearful of the people. I want to restrain the people's ability to do things that need to get done, which is why, again, I look to the historic infrastructure plan. $1.2 trillion sounds like, wow, it's a lot of money. And it is. But when you look at the fact that our need is 4 times that, you go, is it enough? And the answer is no. This is something that should have happened a couple of times by now to fix our infrastructure, but no. We've got to give tax cuts to millionaires and billionaires. We've got to create Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and Warren Buffett. We've got to create our billionaire oligarchs. And we've created them through a tax code that encourages hoarding and extreme wealth. It's what we've done. Congratulations. We have the most billionaires in the world. Yet we still have children who go to bed hungry every night. It's been our policy, and they've done this. Give Republicans credit. They've done this by using the rules of the road that they've rigged to ensure that they maintain power. Because they are the minority party in this country. There are more registered Democrats than there are Republicans. There are more people who support democratic principles and ideals and policies and all that, yet none of that seems to happen. Why? Because of gerrymandering, because of vote rigging, because of, the filibuster, which has always been used in the Senate to be the place where, good ideas and progress for working class folks go to die. Which is why you're seeing people who are so hell-bent on got to maintain the filibuster. When the reality is, as I said, the filibuster has been that thing that the wealth class has used to ensure that, they're insulated from us. And this is the frustrating part of this, because we need what's in that Build Back Better plan. We need massive investment in education and healthcare and infrastructure. We need it. As a country, we need it. And the wealth class needs it. But understand, their thinking is short term. Hooray for me now. The one who dies with the most toys wins. Greed is good. Me. And then you look 20 years down the road, 30 years down the road, and you are where we are now. We haven't invested in the country, and we're looking abroad going, can we compete? The Chinese don't have this problem. They've made these massive investments for a decade now. They don't have a Joe Manchin. They don't have a Republican Party that they have to negotiate with. They just do. They do what we want to do. Now, I'm not advocating in any way, shape, or form a Chinese style of government, but I am advocating for a more democratized form of government. And for me, the filibuster is that one thing that said, no, not going to do it. Not going to have democracy. I have said from the beginning, and I will not shy away from this, I want to see a talking filibuster. When I learned about government as a young man, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington was the movie that everyone had to go back and look at. And it was a talking filibuster. You had to get up and hold the floor. You had to make your impassioned plea for your side. I mean, it's turned into, when they've actually done it, reading the phone book or the Bible or whatever, Dr. Seuss, whatever reading material they have, instead of talking about the issue. But I'm of the mindset, if you want to hold the floor, you got to be on point. Explain to me, Republicans, why you're against increasing the minimum wage. Why can't we have an indexed minimum wage to inflation? Why can't we ensure that the minimum wage is a living wage? Why can't workers join and form unions as the National Labor Relations Act guarantees them? Explain to me through your words, and I want to hear it out of your mouth, why it's bad. Make the argument. See, they don't have to today. All they have to do is, I'm just not going to know. And their supporters never hear or see what these people actually believe. And all they get is a bunch of dark money going into these attack ads from who knows where. Americans for dogs and puppies. Mom loves apple pie in America too. How can you be against that? And they put out these attack ads that makes you think what you really want, you don't. Like healthcare, education for your children, good quality, family-sustaining wage jobs, trade policies that actually encourage domestic production and domestic consumption. Can't have those things because that's bad for the billionaire class, the wealth class of the country. Don't want it because it's bad for them. And look, everybody I talk to, even my most conservative opponents, want voting. Want and believe, say they believe at least, and I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt, that they believe that people should be allowed to vote, that every American should have the right to cast a ballot in what is the greatest experiment in the history of the planet of self-governance. This idea that with our ballot, we cast the future of our nation, and that everyone should have access to that. I've yet to find someone saying, no, we need to be blocking people. Well, that's not true. I do know a couple of original intentists, but they're out on the fringe and probably sitting on the Supreme Court, but that's a whole other story. No, there are some. The folks who tell you that we want to go back to the original intent of the Constitution, they're the ones who want women in the kitchen, barefoot and pregnant, want blacks back in the field as slaves picking cotton, and gays in the closet, and all the other things that era we thought possible. This was a white landowning male country, nobody else. The original intentists, that's what they throw out. But I think most people who are sane and rational, they believe everyone should have the right to vote. And it shouldn't be overly cumbersome. And I believe in this day and age with the technology we have, it should be much easier. Now, I was an early supporter of the For the People Act. I said, there's a lot of stuff in there that, we can throw off the table as the negotiations happen. And what came out of it is Joe Manchin's the Freedom to Vote Act. And I think we need to be moving forward on this. This is Joe Manchin's baby. And we were told going to get 10 Republican votes. They were going to get Republicans to come on board because in the old days, Republicans wanted people to vote. Well, did they? I keep going back to that Paul Weyrich quote from 1980. And again, a lot of stuff happened during the Reagan era. And I point to that change in thinking, that change in the direction of the country, our morals. Because Paul Weyrich in 1980 gave this speech to 20,000 Baptist ministers in Dallas, Texas, saying, hey, do we want everyone to vote? No, we don't want everyone to vote. We want our people to vote. We want to hold them down and increase our vote because, as he said, our power goes up as the voting populace goes down. The more people we get to the polls, the more we can suppress them, the better we do, because they knew they didn't have the numbers, and they still know that. And this is the MO. This is not new. And also, you had the Reagan revolution of hate government, and as I said, it's about hating we the people. Especially if you can throw into we the people the others, which is what the Republicans have done masterfully. But I believe we need something done on the voting reform front, and it's got to happen soon. Because like I said, Republicans they're not hanging around. They're rigging things in states across this country to ensure that it doesn't matter who you vote for, and that's what they want. They want you to think your vote doesn't matter. It's all rigged. They want you to believe that it's fruitless, it's frivolous, it doesn't matter, so that you stay home, so that they don't have to really pull out all the stops that they've been wargaming in their think tanks and in their cloakroom meetings. You think the January 6th coup just came out of nowhere? No. They've been thinking about this stuff for decades. There are constitutional experts who spend days dreaming this stuff up, dreaming up every scenario. And as I said from the beginning, I believe that this is what would have happened in 2016 had Hillary Clinton won. It would have been the same thing. And no election ever will the Republicans ever admit that they've lost. I think we've seen the last, conceding Republican, because Trump still hasn't conceded, even though in every level he's lost. He's lost in every court. Lost. But the Freedom to Vote Act is something we need. A lot of stuff in this we need. Automatic voter registration. We should, I've often said, as an 18-year-old, I had to go to the post office and sign up for selective service. Why wasn't I handed a voter registration card right then and there? Why wasn't that? I can go off and die for my country, but you didn't register me to vote? So I'm of the mindset that everyone should be registered to vote. As soon as you turn 18, bang, you're registered. We should have it should be much easier. Now, there are a lot of states that do online registration. That's good. I think we should open up same-day registration. Good stuff. I think everyone should be allowed to vote, and then felons included, and that is in this. If you've done your debt to society, if you've done your time, and you're out, you should be able to vote. We should be doing a lot on ensuring that people have access to the ballot box. I'm a big fan of early voting. I'm a big fan of drop boxes. In the last election, I've talked about this before. I voted. I said, yes, I would like a mail-in ballot, please. And they sent it to me. I filled it out. It was pretty simple. I followed all the directions. I signed it, and I dropped it off in a box at the elections office. A couple of days later, they sent me an email. Hey, we got your ballot. You're in. And a couple of days after the election, they said, hey, it was counted. Way to go. I think that was a great system. May do it again. I still do like personally going to the polls and pulling the lever. I think there's something good about that exercise in democracy. But for most people who are really, really busy, it's a good option. I like the fact that this would move us towards a paper-based voting system. I'm a huge supporter of hand-marked paper ballots that are countable. This would move us in a direction to get there. I think we need to go after people who provide false information around election time to try and deceive people. This is part of what's in this bill. There's a lot of stuff. Gerrymandering, the thing that's going on in Tennessee right now. We've got to take this power out of the hand of legislators. It's got to be in the hands of we the people. I believe in participatory democracy. I believe in we the people, even if some of us are crazy. There is a voter ID part of this, and I've never been against voter ID per se. I'm against how it was crafted. I'm against what they say, oh, you can have an NRA card, but you can't have a college ID. Which is insane, but I guess, you got your priorities. When I first registered to vote, my electric bill was enough. It's where I lived. I didn't have a driver's license yet because I wasn't driving. Didn't have a car, didn't have a need for a driver's license, but I was 18. Electric bill was enough. It had my name on it, it had my address on it. That was enough for them. If we're going to mandate that people have photo IDs, then there better damn sure be a way to ensure that everyone gets one. And that we do this in a way that it isn't, hey, on the third Tuesday of the fourth month of the seventh year of the 16th century, maybe you get a chance at 6:05 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for 30 seconds. There'll be a window open and you can get. No, we can't do that. And that happens in my state of Pennsylvania, where there are only a couple of days a month where it's open. So if we're going to mandate specific photo IDs, then you got to make that accessible. And this does some of that stuff, which, I'm okay with. The idea is it's going to open up some more information. Transparency is good, like who's paying for all those attack ads. I think you should know who the billionaires behind it is. It does a little bit to create a publicly funded election cycle, which I think is not a bad idea, by creating a small donor-focused matching system, which I think is great, because again, it's getting people involved. This is all stuff that's in here. Prohibits the use of shell companies from funneling foreign money to candidates. We should be following the money of these campaigns. And one of the big ones for me is it ends some of these quid pro quo patronage deals. If you're a federal contractor, we should be knowing if you're giving candidates any time of resource. The Pennsylvania treasurer back a number of years ago, Rob McCord was his name. I'm sure he would have liked to have a much stronger law in place as a deterrent for him not to do exactly that. He was running around, going to state contractors saying, hey, if you want some contracts, you got to give us a campaign donation. I believe he's still sitting in jail, but it was a Herculean leap to get to him. Shouldn't be that difficult. And we need to enforce campaign finance laws. We need to hold people accountable. We need to hold them accountable. Things need to be transparent, and people need to have better access to the ballot box. It's that simple. And the sad reality is, it's probably not going to pass. So got a lot of work to do, the Democrats doing. I'd love to hear your thoughts on, does it happen this week? Does it happen at all? You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back after this with Representative Andy Levin from Michigan. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Time to talk.
Calling all builders, all welders and roofers, engineers and electricians. Calling all brick masons and boiler makers, steel workers and steam fitters. Your country is calling you to rebuild America, to create a cleaner, safer, more prosperous future for all. Tackling climate change, this is the job of our lifetime. It's time to build back better. Let's get to work.
From the steel mills of Pennsylvania, to the auto factories of Michigan, to the modern makers movement, manufacturing makes our nation great. I'm Scott Paul, President of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We bring business and labor together to advocate for policies that everyone can agree on. Together, we can strengthen manufacturing and create good-paying American jobs. Help us keep it made in America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as I said, big week ahead on many fronts. The voting rights front, but also the January 6th, getting to the bottom of what happened, holding people accountable. And I go back to this. People need to be held accountable for their actions. And I look at Jim Jordan, whose letter on why he's not going to cooperate with the January 6th committee is just, I don't know how a sitting member of Congress can get away with this, but he says that he's got nothing to hide, but he has no relevant information for the committee. And I'm going, I think we, the people, should be the judge of that. I think he most certainly should be sitting in the hot seat and answering questions about his actions in and around January 6th. Just my thoughts. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on where the Democrats are going to be moving forward from this point on. Also, maybe some thoughts on January 6th. I've asked Andy Levin to come talk with us. Andy is a congressional representative from Michigan's 9th Congressional District. Andy, thanks for taking some time for us.
Hey, Rick, it's great to be with you. Good to see you.
So I need you to weigh in on Jim Jordan, but I am curious, what are your memories of what happened a little over a year ago?
Well, I'll never forget that day, Rick. As you said, I represent the 9th District of Michigan, and Michigan was one of the states that was being challenged. So we had prepared the 7 Democratic members from Michigan. We met with Speaker Pelosi, with staff, with attorneys. We were ready to defend the legitimacy of Michigan's election, which was, really, there's no question about it. It was audited. It was challenged in court, upheld multiple times. But anyway, we had made prepared our speeches. And I was in my office getting ready for that. And there came a banging on the door, not a knock. And the only person I had with me because of security and COVID was my chief. He went and answered the door. This Capitol police officer bursts in. We're evacuating the Cannon building. So that was sort of the start of it. And we were evacuated through the tunnels over to another Longworth office building. I ended up spending some time with my good friend Deb Holland and then with my Michigan colleague, Alyssa Slotkin, because they had offices in the Longworth building. And then we went over and it was, Rick, this is the first time since 1814, since the War of 1812, our capital, our temple of democracy, was ransacked by a violent mob who had mace, bear spray, all manner of, hand ties and clubs and poles, and they beat police officers. They killed people. It was horrifying. And
can you imagine what would have happened? Can you imagine what would have happened if they'd have gotten hold of you or another member of Congress? Has that gone through your head?
I think I have a defense mechanism, dude. But they would have killed us. A lot of them would have. And they were obviously looking, they had nooses, they had, all kinds of, and they chanted, they were looking for us, kill us, kill the vice president. So, but here's the thing. The people who invaded, ransacked, trashed our capital, hurt people, must be held accountable. But I'll tell you else who needs to be held accountable. We walk back crunching over broken glass and walking over freshly swabbed up blood into that House chamber. And we were determined to finish our duty, which is just supposed to be a ceremonial celebration of democracy. There was no real decision being made. The people had voted, right? We're just supposed to ratify it. And 147 of my colleagues, despite what had just happened, despite that violence, despite that desecration, voted to nullify the votes of millions of their fellow Americans. They also are insurrectionists.
Yep. No, and that's
then.
No,
yeah,
you're
and
spot
then
on.
you get to the Jim Jordans of the world and others who evidently participated in planning this in some way, or knew about it, or were talking to the White House about it. What we're learning, this select committee has done such a fantastic job. We should have, of course, had a 9/11 commission type of thing, but the Republicans wouldn't do that. So Pelosi said, okay, we'll have a select committee. Then Kevin McCarthy tried to appoint people who were involved in the insurrection. So that was crazy. But we have 2 brave Republicans and the Democrats on this committee, and they have interviewed hundreds of people, looked at thousands and thousands of pages of documents. A lot of what they found hasn't come out yet because they're organizing it. Yeah. But clearly, a number of my colleagues, including Jim Jordan, seem to have been involved in some way in preparations for January 6th, talking to the White House back and forth, talking to these war rooms, different So of course he should come forward and testify and be questioned about what he knew.
Yeah, see, I want all of them held accountable. I want the people who defecated on the floor and broke windows, absolutely. But I want the people who organized this. I want the people who funded it. And more importantly, I want the people who are going to benefit from it. And that goes all the way up to Donald Trump himself. I don't think we can move forward unless there is transparency and accountability in this. And I look to someone like Jordan, especially, who was on that Benghazi committee that I heard for years, two and a half, almost 3 years, we can't move forward as a country until we get to the bottom of this. And yet they're the ones saying now, well, can't we just move forward? Can't we just move on? Can't we all just get along? No, we can't. Just my thought. Anyway, so I'm happy we're moving in the direction. I did want to get your thoughts on some of the other stuff that has to happen. We got to get some voting rights stuff done. I'm hoping the president, who's going to be in Atlanta tomorrow, is going to help move that along. I'm curious your thoughts on do you think the piece of legislation, the voting rights legislation, is going to move through?
Well, I mean, first of all, we can't accept failure. So I'm not at all close to being ready to give up. The situation in the country is super dire on this. The voters across the country are facing discrimination at the ballot box in so many forms, like unlawful purges, shortened voting hours, closing of polling places in low income and minority communities. And, last year, over 19 states passed 34 new laws that create barriers to voting. And in the last couple of years, 389 bills have been introduced in 48 states to restrict voting access, and including in my own state of Michigan, where we have special problems because the legislature could do a weird trick where a referendum is planned, but it doesn't have to actually go to the people. The state legislature can pass it and the governor can't veto it. And anyway, that's if you are interested, it's a crazy quirk of Michigan. But here's the thing, Rick, the House has acted to protect the rights of all American voters. We passed the For the People Act, H.R. 1. We passed the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. But these actions have been held up by the filibuster in the Senate. And it's blatant obstructionism. And so it's time to abolish the filibuster as far as I'm concerned. But specifically what's happened over in the Senate is Joe Manchin said, well, HR 1 or S1 is too much for me. And I'm a former Secretary of State, so I'm going to write my own law. And I'm going to get 10 Republicans to vote for it. Well, Rick, actually, what he wrote is good enough, brother. It's good enough. It would make Election Day a national holiday. It would have 15 days of early voting, including 2 weekends, automatic registration, motor voter, register up till Election Day, get rid of partisan gerrymandering, and deal with these voter suppression issues and purges of lists, and also deal with this thing going around the country that they want legislatures to be able to overturn the results of elections if they don't like them. I mean, these things are the end of democracy. Okay, exactly. So where are we? Did he get his 10 Republicans? No, he did not even close, right? So we're at a point where Joe Manchin and others have to agree on some little tweak to the filibuster to let this get voted on by majority vote. That has been done scores of times. There are many, many exceptions to the filibuster, which after all is only a Senate rule. It's nothing, 50 senators could vote to abolish the filibuster altogether. And they just went around the filibuster in a way like this to deal with the debt ceiling. So don't ask me about predictions. Ask me what I need from everybody who's here and are watching us. Get on your phone, get in your email, write a letter, Absolutely. Get on a bicycle, ride to the Capitol. Everybody raise your voice, march around in the street and say, we must save our democracy. The Senate must pass democracy defending legislation, because whatever they can get through the Senate, we will pass in the House.
No, and that's what's needed. I mean, I've said for a long time, the filibuster has been the reason that the Senate is the place where good ideas go to die, especially if it's something good for working folks. And one of the things I did want to ask you about is the PRO Act, which is something that I've been advocating for a very long time, Andy. It seems like anything that helps we, the working people, doesn't seem to have a chance. And I go back to, I was a Bill Clinton supporter simply because he said, hey, we're going to pass strike replacement. I voted for Barack Obama twice because, hey, we're going to get something better than the Employee Free Choice Act. Looked me in the eye, shook my hand twice. We're getting something better, he said. We got nothing. And this is one of those things that I don't think another administration can go by without some kind of help for working class folks to be able to join and form unions and bargain for better wages, hours, and conditions. I just don't think it can happen.
Rick, there's no, the cause of my life is the workers' freedom to form unions and bargain collectively. It's the only way to increase the voice and power of workers in our society. And, I started out as a union organizer in the early 80s and helped thousands of people form unions with SEIU. And then I was a staff attorney. Bill Clinton wasn't really for labor law reform. Instead of proposing anything, he created a blue ribbon commission. That sucked for the workers of this country, but it was good. It was good for me personally because I got to be the staff attorney to that commission and I learned a lot. But, then Newt Gingrich was elected and to be speaker and our proposals just gathered dust and Clinton never did anything. Yeah, he tried striker replacement, but so late, he did it way too late and it never really took hold. And then you come to Obama. Here's the point. Since the National Labor Relations Act was passed in 1935, the Wagner Act, Congress has not passed a new law, a paragraph, a damn comma that makes it easier for workers to organize and bargain. And of course, they passed a lot that made it harder, like the Taft-Hartley amendments and parts of the Landrum-Griffin law. And then the courts have stepped in and the states with their right to freeload laws. It's been a disaster. So you are absolutely right. Let me just say three quick things about this. Number one, the most important thing happening is not discussions in Congress, but workers in motion in this country. Because when the Wagner Act was passed in 35, it wasn't because a bunch of genteel Congress people had a lovely conversation. It was because workers were organizing and striking and the bosses were freaking out.
Yep.
And they said, it was like, we think of it as like our foundational labor law. It was a compromise at that time. And so again, you've got Kellogg workers who were struck and got a contract. You got John Deere workers who rejected 2 proposals before they got a contract. You got mine workers in Alabama who've been on strike for months and months and months. You have people forming unions in, e-commerce and, digital media and all this crazy stuff. You got tens of thousands of graduate employees. I once went to jail, or several times went to jail with John Sweeney to demand the right of graduate employees to organize. I think we did it once at Temple and once at NYU. And now NYU's workers have a union, and now the graduate employees of Columbia just got a contract. So, we've got to stand and fight for all workers, but it's when workers are in motion that we'll have a better chance to pass.
I'm right there with
PRO
you.
Act.
Absolutely. I say that the NLRA was a peace treaty more than anything.
Exactly. Now, one other quick thing I got to tell you, because there's not many people even talk about this, but in Build Back Better, we have some important provisions from the PRO Act. So if we could get the Build Back Better Act passed as we had it in the House, we put the penalties from the PRO Act in Build Back Better. So you can't change everybody's rights, but when an employer violates workers' rights, it fits under a budget reconciliation to say, hey, let's get a little more money for the Treasury by socking that employer with an actual meaningful fine for firing that worker or whatever. That puts money in the Treasury. We also increase the fines for violations of OSHA, like tenfold increases, Rick, serious, and violations of the wage and hour. Plus, we put $5 million in there to enact my provision to have electronic voting for workers who want to organize during a pandemic, or if it just seems too intimidating to have the election in the employer premises, let people vote electronically. That's what they've done under the Railway Labor Act for many years without one scintilla of evidence of fraud or a problem. It saves the taxpayers money because you don't have to send a board agent out to Poughkeepsie or, Phoenix to run the election. So anyway, there's some good stuff, but I am 100% with you. Until we pass fundamental labor law like the PRO Act, we will not rebuild the middle class of this society, full stop. And it's my number one priority in Congress.
No, and thank goodness you're there. Thank goodness you're doing the work you're doing. But to your point about the electronic voting, then Amazon can't have the post office bring a mailbox that they can point a bunch of cameras at to watch who's voting. That's the reason that can't happen. And the fines you talk about, currently the most dreaded part of the fine system is posting a notice and maybe back pay minus anything someone at work. So there's no real penalty. We need those financial penalties, but we also need everything else that's in the PRO Act, in my opinion. Totally. We need to undo the last 40, 50 years of assaults on organized labor and give people the power to join and form and also to collectively bargain. Because, look, we're in a moment, Andy, and you see it. There are 4.5 million people who've left their job. The great resignation. People are leaving. There is chaos. It's just not being reported on enough, and it's not in the streets yet. But at some point, it's going to have to be.
Absolutely. Can I tell you a little story? So I get to Congress right after I first won in 2018, and I get on the Education and Labor Committee. The union organizer goes to Congress, right? And I say, well, when is labor law reform going to come up? And somebody said, well, in like 3 weeks. I was like, dang, could I see it before it comes up? Me like a union organizer / labor lawyer. And they go, oh yeah. So they send it to me. Rick, I marked the heck up out of it. I wrote all my little comments and I said, well, could I meet with the committee staff? And so here comes these committees. They like, well, no member ever asked to meet with us, So here they come down to my office and we really, put some improvements in there. But I'm telling you, the PRO Act does more, so many things.
We need it.
Workers would, if they fire you because you're trying to form a union, boom, injunction to put you back in there. First contract arbitration, so many things. So we are going to get it done, brother. You and me and the rest of the working people. Thanks.
Andy, I appreciate the time, man. Great stuff. Thanks so much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Michigan Representative Andy Levin. Make sure you check out the work that he's doing. We'll get links out on social media. Quick break, right back. Stick around. This is The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
It doesn't matter what kind of weather. It doesn't matter what time of day or night. When Mother Nature's done her worst, the only thing that matters to us is keeping the lights on for you. The hardworking women and men of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, dedicated to keeping the power on in communities all across the country. Because when bad weather strikes, we know what matters most. IBEW, the power professionals.
The climate crisis is here.
These temperatures are almost unbelievable, even for a meteorologist.
And the solution is here too. Clean energy, like wind turbines and solar panels. Now, Congress has to invest in it, and in the millions of workers ready to install it across the country. Because in America, we don't hide from problems like climate change. We take them on. We innovate. We lead. Because if we invest in these workers, in their future, at this moment, that's how we build back better.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, big week ahead. And one of those things that there's a lot on the agenda and a lot that needs to get done in a short period of time, from voting rights to something on moving the child tax credit, moving something that we're going to be able to have Democrats run on this coming year. But it's a big week, especially on the voting rights. And I can't emphasize enough to be calling your representatives and saying, hey, we without question most certainly need to get some stuff done. And here to share some thoughts on how that happens, I've asked Sam Cornell to come talk with us. Sam is the executive director of the Democratic National Committee, Democrats.org, the website if you want to check out some of the work that they do there. Sam, thanks for taking some time for us.
It's great to be having me on.
So I'm looking at the week ahead, and there is a lot of opportunity, a lot of hope. Where are we going this week?
Well, the president and the vice president are headed down to Atlanta tomorrow for a big speech on voting rights. This is yet another step in the march towards historic voting rights legislation that the president has been full-throated about. It's one of their top priorities. As you mentioned, there are several big priorities. This president and this vice president are trying to do big things, and they've already done some absolutely massive things. But down in Atlanta, the president is going to lean further into the fact that we need rules changes to accommodate historic voting rights legislation. In no small measure because democracy is at stake. And the contrast with Republicans could not be more clear. You have one party that is full-throated in their support of voting rights, wanting to make it fair and accessible for everyday Americans to go and cast their ballot through a number of different mechanisms. And you have Republicans who continue to promulgate the big lie. And the big lie that a little more than a year ago caused an insurrection, a violent insurrection at the Capitol, where law enforcement officers ultimately lost their lives. And now that same big lie is driving Republicans across the country to pursue the most extreme anti-voter legislation in a generation. And so tomorrow down in Atlanta, the president and the vice president are going to be full-throated in their support for a historic voting rights package that I am hopeful will ultimately get through Congress.
You and I will agree we need to do something on voting rights. The Republicans have been, well, you got to give them credit. They've been very busy on figuring out how to rig the next election. But if anything is to get done in the Senate, if we are to move voting rights legislation, you're going to have to do something with the filibuster. And the right wing is apoplectic over the possibility of that happen. In fact, Grover Norquist's group put out a statement basically saying that you guys want to destroy one of the pillars of democracy in order to preserve democracy. This is what they're saying your argument is, sort of like a wartime commander saying, we have to destroy a village to save it. They go on to say, but if the filibuster goes the way of the dodo birds, congressional Democrats, that's you, are going to be able to ram through Green New Deal, woke spending. It's going to be horrible. It's going to be horrible. Sam, you're going to do all this horrible stuff.
Well, I mean, you and I both know, Rick, that Mitch McConnell's only measure of success is power. And if you want me to believe that Mitch McConnell won't do everything in his power to get every tax cut for the wealthy, well-connected corporations through, if you don't believe that Mitch McConnell is going to ram as many judges through as possible if he's put back in control of the Senate, I mean, these are crocodile tears. And the reality is that President Biden has been very, very clear that this is specific to voting rights legislation. Because at the end of the day, the filibuster doesn't matter if we no longer have a democracy. And, that not to be overly alarmist, but that's really where we are. You have fake audits in just about every battleground state being pushed by Republicans. In my home state of Wisconsin, Rick, you have Republicans trying to get rid of the entire elections apparatus infrastructure and install their own Republican cronies to be able to determine the outcome of elections, to not let votes matter, but to make sure that the people counting the votes can decide who won or lost. That's not where we are. And so the president, to his credit, after a 40-year career in the Senate, he is an institutionalist. And the fact that President Biden is now saying that we need meaningful reform and changes to the rules of the Senate in order to protect our democracy, that's a huge step forward. He deserves a ton of credit for that. And at the end of the day, the Republicans, they're against everything and they don't stand for anything. And that's the contrast that we are going to spend the next 10 months delivering directly to the American people, from volunteers at the doors and on the phones to our paid media to our organizing efforts. At the end of the day, we have an incredibly strong record to run on. It will be voting rights in part, but not exclusively. We're going to get more done.
No, and this is where I've been saying for the longest time, and I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad to hear what you're saying, because I think it's important for people to understand that Democrats maybe are willing at some point to ball up their fists and get in there and throw a couple of punches, because it's been the MO kind of that when you got the keys to the steamroller, it's parked on the side of the road. It's time to lead, get some stuff done. And I know Joe Manchin, Kirsten Sinema, that seems to be the fly in the ointment right now. But things got to get moving. People want results, not excuses.
Well, your listeners shouldn't forget that Senator Manchin has already supported meaningful voting rights legislation. He voted for it on the floor of the Senate. We're going to get something done. There is a deal to be had on the Build Back Better agenda, which would cut costs, expand elder care and child care to make it easier to care for our loved ones in the dawn of their life and the twilight of their life. And on voting rights, this is one of the top issues that this president and vice president are animated by.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I'm confident we're going to get something through. But at the end of the day, the midterms and campaigns generally are about three things, Rick. They're about money, having resources to get your message out, to deliver it to the American people. We've raised more last year than any non-presidential year ever in the history of the DNC. We are matching what the Republicans have done. And as we all know, Republicans are the party of dark money. So that is not nothing that our grassroots are stepping up. Average donation in the low double digits here. The second is our record. Put aside Build Back Better and voting rights and any other additional pieces of legislation that I'm confident we're going to get through this year. We already have an incredible record to run on, Rick. Think about it. The American Rescue Plan cut child poverty in half, $130 billion to schools to help them reopen and do so safely. When President Biden took office, 46%, give or take, of students were attending school in person full time. That's now well north of 90%. We have more work to do. We're going to, see this pandemic evolve, and we'll have to respond accordingly. But the American Rescue Plan alone has set this country on a much stronger trajectory. We then passed the bipartisan infrastructure law. Donald Trump spent 4 years talking about how it was infrastructure week. You know who got it done in his first year? President Biden.
Right.
The unemployment rate down below 4% now. That is the largest single year drop ever in history. More than 6 million jobs created by this president last year. That's the most in the first year of a presidency ever. I mean, I could go on and on and on, Rick.
Yeah,
but the
there's
reality
a lot to unpack there. No, I mean, there's an awful lot in there, but and we're going to get to some of that stuff. But the voting rights thing, my problem with all of it is Joe Manchin wrote the bill. How come this isn't already passed? This is my problem. We were supposed to get the For the People Act. He said, no, I've got something better. I'm going to get 10 Republicans to come along. They didn't. How come this hasn't already passed?
Well, as I just walked through, there's been a lot we've accomplished already. I think part of this is just the challenge of how many crises this administration and Democrats that were put into power in January of last year inherited from Donald Trump and the Republicans. And the reality is I can only articulate what the president, the vice president, and senators from Chuck Schumer to Joe Manchin have said. Joe Manchin, again, voted for that very legislation that you're talking about. And so tomorrow, what the president is going to do is continue to raise the urgency to say now is the time. Majority Leader Schumer has set a hard deadline of next week in order to get a vote on voting rights legislation. And I know, senators like Warner in Virginia and Senator Tester in Montana, they started out in a place where they weren't comfortable with meaningful changes to the filibuster in order to protect voting rights. And now they are on board. So the situation has evolved.
Good.
And, at the end of the day, Rick, I think highly of myself, but I'm never going to purport to be in the middle of those very conversations that you just referenced. But I know they're happening. And I know the president is full-throated in his support and driving the march to meaningful voting rights legislation.
Good, and we can help out by making sure we're calling those senators and letting them know where we're at. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show with Sam Cornell. He's the executive director of the Democratic National Committee. Democrat.org is their website. We'll get links out on social media. You can check out the Democrats page. You brought up a whole bunch of stuff. There's a lot to get through there. And the child poverty thing to me is a huge one. I was, as a kid, grew up in a housing project on the west side of Cleveland in poverty. In American poverty. I mean, we were at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder. I can't imagine in the 70s what a couple $100 a month would have done for our lives. And it's $250 a month to me now doesn't seem like anything. But the fact that it made such a massive difference in the lives of working families and of children in this country just seems like an absolute no-brainer that we would continue it. Now, understand, generally, I'm against the idea of handouts, but when I look at the records of what happened, this seems like it should have already gone through, and I can't understand why, again, Joe Manchin being the guy kind of holding this up.
Well, this is yet another example of President Biden and Democrats reorienting the economy to benefit people who power the economy. And make no mistake about it, that's working people. I was not raised dirt poor by any means, Rick. But, every fall when soccer season started, my brothers and I'm one of three, would walk out to the garage and we'd rummage through the box of secondhand soccer cleats. My mom did everything she could to provide for our family. And you're absolutely right that a couple $100 every single month can make a huge difference, saving for college, diapers, food on the table. God forbid, every now and again, families have the opportunity to eat at a restaurant once it's when it's safe to do so. And make no mistake about it, Rick, the American Rescue Plan, which cut child poverty in half, put hundreds of dollars into the pockets of working parents every single month. Every single Republican member of Congress voted against that legislation. And you know what they didn't vote against? The $1.5 trillion kickback to corporations under the Trump tax cut. So that's the contrast we're talking about here, Rick. People want to argue whether it's a handout or not. I'm sorry, but a couple $100 that helps everyday Americans with children put food on the table, stock their pantry, fix the broken roof. I mean, that is not a handout. That is an economy that is finally working for the people who work.
No, when I was a kid, and I go back to this often, when I think about policies, I think about where I came from. And, there were many months throughout the year where at the end of the month, there was literally nothing in the house. And I want that for no child. And as I said, while I'm against the idea of handout programs, this seems, the evidence is there. People used it for the right things. I don't care what the rumor is of what may or may not have been said by Joe Manchin. I don't believe people are buying drugs or doing other things with it. I think people are using that money the way it was meant to take care of their kids and their families.
Absolutely. I mean, again, to go back to the Trump tax cut for a little bit of contrast here, Rick, as your listeners are sitting around, the kitchen table with their family members debating politics, God forbid it comes up. $1.5 trillion, more than 80% of it went to the absolute wealthiest among us in corporations. And what did they use it for? Largely to buy their own stock back, to make more money off of U.S. taxpayer dollars. They made more money. And what we're doing is putting a reasonable amount of money into the pockets of working people that goes right back into the economy. That to me is a contrast, a conversation I am ready and willing to have with the American people.
And one that, absolutely we do need to have, Sam. Now, I did want to get some of your thoughts on last week's anniversary. And I hate to use the word anniversary. I'm not sure what the right word for a horrible, tragic insurrection is. But I wanted to get your thoughts. I mean, we find out last week that the vice president was actually in the DNC when the pipe bomb was found. And yet I keep hearing people telling me, especially my right-wing friends, that it was a patriotic day, Sam. It was a day like any other. It was a good, God-fearing Christian kind of day with people loving their countries. And I think, as the one guy said, they were just out, seeking redress of their grievances. I wanted to get your thoughts.
President Biden had a line that really stuck with me from that day, his speech 4 or 5 days ago, which was, you can't love your country only when you win. And the reality is that for the first time in generations, maybe ever, the Republican Party, the very core of one of the two political parties in the United States, refuses to support, to defend the very democratic ideals that have made America the country that it is. That is jarring. That is absolutely jarring. I'm sorry, but the Patriots on January 6th were not those who were wielding Trump flags and beating law enforcement officers. They were the law enforcement officers. The Patriots are not people, using fake audits in Arizona to try to change the clear outcome of the election. 81 million votes Joe Biden earned and Kamala Harris earned in 2020. The Patriots are the local election officials who are doing everything in their power, despite death threats and despite the Republican National Committee and Republicans across the country refusing to defend them. Those are the true patriots. And so, January 6th was unbelievably unfortunate. I mean, it was sad. Law enforcement officers lost their lives. Others lost their lives. But there's only one political party now that is defending the very democratic principles that make us the beacon of light for the world. And that's the Democratic Party. And, make no mistake about it, Republicans can't win in a fair fight. They know it, Rick. They don't have ideas. They don't have policies that are supported by more than 70% of the American people like Democrats. So what are they doing? They're going and trying to rig the very playing field of democracy. And we're not going to let them happen. we're not gonna let it happen.
Which is why we need to get something, especially on the voting rights front, but also the other things. At the end of the day, we have a lot of work to do, and there's a lot that needs to be cleaned up, and we need actual leadership in this. So last line of questioning I've got for you, in looking at this, what's the request from us? I mean, I believe democracy is participatory. I believe each one of us have a right, a duty to be involved. What are we asking people to do? What are we telling folks?
Well, there's a lot outside of our control right now, Rick. I feel it, and I'm, the top staff person at the Democratic National Committee. I'm sure you feel it, and you have a huge literal megaphone in front of you. I'm sure your listeners feel it. There's a lot outside of our control. But at the end of the day, there's a ton inside of our control too, within our control. We have power, we have agency right now. And when voting rights passes, when Build Back Better passes, when we are already out there communicating all of our accomplishments to date to the American people, but we still have to go win elections. We still have to make sure that Republicans don't flip state legislatures that are currently in Democratic control. We still have Democratic governors across the country that are the last line of defense. They're the only thing standing between really bad, frankly, kind of nutty Republicans and very good people.
There you go.
Women who need access to reproductive rights, children who deserve a shot at a stronger future, teachers who are on the front lines of everything.
Good stuff, Sam. I gotta take a break here. Sam, I appreciate it. Thanks so much. Sam Cornell, Executive Director of the Democratic National Committee. Quick break, right back.